Well, I think the next book we should talk about is the one that we both ended up reading in the last few weeks, which is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Claire Keegan is a best-selling and award-winning writer of short stories and novellas. She was raised on a farm in Ireland, studied in the USA, lived for a time in Wales, and has returned to living in Ireland. Small Things Like These was published in 2021 and won the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction, the Carey Prize for Irish Novel of the Year, and was shortlisted for the Rathbone Folio Prize and the Booker Prize. A film adaptation of the novella premiered at the 74th Berlin International Film Festival on February 15th, 2024, starring Cillian Murphy and directed by Tim Mailand. That's one of the most prestigious info bits we've ever done.
No kidding.
This book and this author have won a lot of things, and it's fascinating because I didn't realize she hadn't ever published a novel.
That's true. All of her books are just little novellas, aren't they?
She's published 2 novellas, and that's it. And for novel novella wise, everything else is short stories. So she's really a short story writer.
Cool.
And has these 2 kind of, and this one was launched off from one of her short stories. Like she wrote a short story with a very similar theme and then made it bigger for this novella.
That's very cool. I didn't know that.
Very interesting. How did you feel about this one? Did you enjoy it? Did you like it? Did you hate it?
Yeah, I mean, my journey with this book is that it's tiny, right? But I want to say for the first, because it was one of the first books of the year for me because I was reading it at the end of the year kind of, so it kind of carried over. But for 2 or 3 weeks, I would just read 1 or 2 pages of this book every little.
Yeah.
So I had a really weird beginning with this book. So I was I don't know if I'm vibing with this. And then I was I need to just start over again and read it properly. And so I did that because I was
cool.
Maybe a third of the way in, and I couldn't even tell you what this guy's job was. It had been so long since I started the book that I was I don't even know what's going on right now. Who is this girl he's talking to? And so I went back to the beginning and reread everything, and I liked it a lot. I wouldn't say I loved it. It's not a new favorite. I know a lot of people really love this book. And it's just, I think, a little bit, the problem is me. It's this isn't necessarily my kind of book, but I really enjoyed it for what it was. It's quite slow and quiet, meditative, and but also spooky. It's definitely spooky. The content of the book it's spooky stuff. But I did really enjoy it. It kind of in some ways reminded me a little bit of my reading experience of The True Deceiver. I feel it's got similar vibes. It's kind of cold, kind of creepy,
snowy,
spooky a little bit, but also Christmassy. So it had a warmth at its backbone, and
yes.
So I ended up liking it. What about you?
I guess I should say what it's about, since I do think it's funny because this book has been very popular since it came out in 2021, but I didn't know what it was about until I read it. So maybe we should try and debunk for everyone what the heck this book is about. So this book stars Cillian Murphy. I know you want me to say it stars Bill Furlong, but it doesn't, because now that Cillian Murphy is the lead in the movie version, I was just picturing
that's
Cillian
all I could
Murphy
see. That's all I could see.
time.
It's true.
So he's a coal merchant. So he's kind of a miner. I think he had a period in his life where he was a miner, but now he's kind of transitioned to basically selling coal. He still has to do a lot of labor, shoveling the coal into his truck and transporting coal and everything. So it's still a very difficult job. But his job is basically delivering coal throughout his small Irish county. Mainly this little town, but sometimes he goes slightly farther out to deliver coal. And this is all coinciding over the one Christmas period. I want to say the whole book takes place over a week.
Yeah, it's starts the day before Christmas Eve or something and ends a couple days after Christmas. It might be 3 or 4 days. I feel like it was a really
it's
tight
a very
timeline.
short little period of time. And the kind of moment that the catalyst of the pivotal moment in the book is when he goes to deliver coal to a monastery. And the monastery is one of what was called at the time a Magdalene laundry. These were these homes that were set up throughout the world, actually. I did a lot of research on them and read up on them just because The whole thing was a little vague in the book, and I wanted to like actually
kind of
understand what was going on
a little bit, which is
it expects you to kind of follow up on what it is. But they were these basically labor houses where people, like a workhouse, where women would be forced to go if they were seen as, and this is heavy quotations, fallen women, which was the term used at the time for maybe a woman who was a sex worker or a woman who had had a child out of marriage or whatever. They would then be forced to live at these convents, and these they were all run by the Catholic Church, and they would be forced to work for no pay. So it was basically prison, but not prison. So in some ways, it's kind of worse than prison because you don't have any rights, and like nobody knows that you're there.
To like deserve to be there.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. They weren't like, you didn't go through the justice system in order to get to them. But you were forced to work, and they were all seen as like, oh, it's just a laundry center, and like we do laundry for the community, and it's like helping these women, and it's basically charity. Like that's the front of it. But yeah, so he goes to one of these institutions, which I didn't know anything about. And I was saying to Connor, I was like, classic. You're constantly learning about the horrible, horrible systems that like humans have created throughout history.
Yeah, that was
like,
part of what had me
whole thing I didn't know about.
Right? That was part of for me at the beginning of the story too, where I was like, what's going on here? Like, why is he so like spooked by this girl? Like, I don't know. But so I was like, I need to figure something out, and then go back and read it again, and then it all made more sense.
Yeah, because it wasn't just a small thing. It was tens of thousands of women across the world who were put into these institutions. It's just awful. But anyways, he goes to one of these convents. He sees some of these girls being put into this labor, and he's deeply disturbed by it. Yeah. And I would say that that's kind of what the novel is about. It's about him reckoning, like, wait,
you can't stop thinking about
this is happening in my town. And we all kind of knew it, but now I've seen it. I've faced it. What do I do with that information? And he has to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
I will say, like, it won the Orwell Prize, which is basically a prize given to books for political purpose, because, you know, Orwell said that he wrote in order to help his politics be spread wider, which is very fascinating because like Animal Farm in 1984 are novels. They're not real, but they're clearly based on things that Orwell's worried about in real life. And so this book is totally that. It's like a novella that is not real, but is about a real thing that like actually happened. Yeah, and makes us reflect on that and think about that through a story, which is often like such a great way to process things, or can be a kickoff point to like me then Googling this for a couple hours or whatever. So I did definitely enjoy that. I felt like it ended right when I wanted it to keep going. Like I will not spoil it anyway, but like it ends at a certain point that is in some way satisfying because you like see what he's gonna do. You're like, oh, okay, that's what this character's decided. But I would have loved to keep spending more time with this. Yeah, I would have been really fascinated to see what then happened and what the consequences of that would have been, and learning more. I would have loved to learn even more about how these places operated in Ireland and you know what I mean? Like, I think it would have been really interesting, but that's just my curiosity, I suppose. Yeah. I did really like it. I gave it 4 stars, but I didn't love it. It's not like a personal new favorite.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. Like, I really appreciate it. I feel like this is one of those cases where I'm like, I really appreciate it, and I would totally, like, recommend this to lots of people.
Definitely.
Because, like you said, it's, like, it's a very important story to be told and, like, to learn about, but it's easy to read, I would say. Like, it's not a super difficult book. It's a good entry point, like you said.
Yes.
I thought this was really good.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I took a couple of notes while I was reading, and like the thing that stuck out to me was that he, like you said, he's like reckoning with what do I do, and like for a lot of the book, he's kind of like, oh, maybe I just won't do anything. It would be easier to not do anything. And like his wife even at one point says something kind of along the lines of like, you know, we have our little life here. Let's just take care of our own. Like, why should we bother with these, like, with helping other people? They have 5 daughters for one thing that we didn't mention, but yeah. So that's something that I found interesting, is that he feels like I don't want to, but he keeps thinking about it. And so it's kind of like about how you know, sometimes you need to do the right thing even if it's hard. And
yes,
that
and
was
even though it'll kind of blow up your life a little
exactly bit. And it's like, he's like, do I want to be the person to do that? Like, am I going to be that guy? So it's like he's making he's like got a lot bouncing around in his head, and it's very interesting because like he clearly does want to help people, and he has these 5 daughters, so he wants to like be a good father to them, right? And like make, it's just, so it had me thinking a lot while I was reading it. I was like, oh man, Bill, Cillian Murphy, are you like I was just really I was really feeling for him for sure. So yeah, it was a book that brought up emotions.
I'm definitely wanting to see the movie. I will say that I really want to see the movie.
Me too.
It says it's come out, obviously. It came out at that film festival. And I think it came out in the UK, but I don't think it's come out in Canada.
Yeah,
I can't find any screenings or anything.
I have to figure that out. The last thing I want to say about the book is that while I was reading this, I could literally hear the people's Irish accents while I was reading. Like sometimes when you read a book, it just like kind of leaps off the page in that way. Yeah, and it did that for me because the way it's written is just like, it's very beautifully written in a way where you can hear the people, like the manner of speech that people in Ireland often use. And I was just like, oh, this is so wonderful. I just love that. So.
And another thing was you and I mentioned this yesterday. We both struggled with it being 1985.
Yes.
It really didn't feel like
felt
1985.
Older. It felt like more in the past than that, for sure.
To me, it felt like I was reading a book from the 50s. And maybe it's just because it's Cillian Murphy. Maybe it's just because he's a coal merchant. And I imagine that as an older profession. But something about it didn't feel like the 80s.
Yeah, there was a bit of a disconnect for me there because I was like, this does not feel like 1985 at all.
No,
that's okay.
That was interesting.
Yeah.